Tonight, the topic is tracking Sada. The Savannah Accelerated Development Authority, Sada, is a government policy initiative aimed at addressing the development gap that exists between northern and southern Ghana. Sada's mandate is to accelerate the socio-economic development of the Savannah Belt through strategic investment in resource development. It envisions a forested north by 2030, where agricultural production is modernized and oriented towards a larger market. Government, in its manifesto of 2008, promised to start with a seed capital of 200 million Ghana cedis, adding a yearly contribution of 100 million Ghana cedis. Tonight, can the government tell Ghanaians Sada is on track? Be part of the discussion by testing your contributions, concerns, opinion, and suggestions to 1760 or post them here on Facebook wall as the Sada boss explains the programs under Sada. Tonight with me in the studio is Mr. Gilbert Edie, the CEO of Savannah Accelerated Development Authority, and Mr. Anthony Abeifa Kabo, the MPP National Youth Organizer. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Edie, let me start with you. After 2 years of Sada, where are we now?
After 2 years of Sada, we've made significant strides, in fact, very enviable strides. And I'm particularly very proud, to be associated with the level that we have reached so far. The law establishing Sada was enacted by Parliament in 2010, and this is 2012. So that is 2 years after the law was established. After the establishment, we've been able to establish a board of directors, then myself, as a CEO, and some other technical staff that I don't need to mention here. With those establishments, we've been able to kickstart Sada's main activities of startup activities. We have established, we've located an office facility, which we are just at the last stage of its rehabilitation for us to be able to use. Prior to that, we were occupying a building that was generously given to us by the Northern Regional Coordinating Council, which housed Sada. Then beyond that, we started with budget preparation. We got a budget that was raised in 2011 and received government funding, for that budget. Then you remember there was some floods sometime 2010, 2011. And Sada came in very vigorously to be able to arrest the trauma that people who were involved in the Sada were engulfed in, to the extent that 6,000 hectares were supported through Sada funding to be able to address the effect of the floods. Then beyond that, we are talking about funding. We got a budget release in 2011 budget of 30 million. And then another 30 million in the appropriation bill, which we will normally be disbursed on quarterly basis. And that one also is another 30 million. Then the government, like you said, promised a seed capital of 200 million. And the government was to raise that 200 million. The government has raised the 200 million, but has so far released 100 million out of it to Sada for the first half of 2012. And then the second half of 2012, the second half of the 100 million will be added onto Sada. That's where we stand as of now.
Before we continue, you said something that I want to bring your attention to it. Are you saying that after 2 years of Sada, you don't have a permanent office yet?
I am saying that the law was passed 2 years ago.
Yes.
And then I, as CEO, I was appointed in October.
Of last year?
That's right.
2011?
That's right.
Why the gap?
You and I know that you needed a technical team to be able to do the necessary strategic planning. And that technical team was already on the ground. And through their activities, they came up with this, what do you call them, with the writing of the Sada Act, the appointment of board of directors. And the appointment of board of directors itself is a very rigorous exercise to be able to get the competent and the right people to be put in place. So it went through all these processes of doing things on the drawing board until those achievements were made. And then the whole process of appointment of the CEO itself is a very lengthy one, because you have to engage the services of a consultant, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Then they did an advertisement, screening, shortlisting, interview before appointment. And all these things take time. And that is why my appointment came, it started with 1st October. So after 1st October, with the CEO, I kicked off the activities of Sada, and that is the achievement that I'm talking about.
Okay, I would like to come back to that, the process, whether 2 years is enough time or too long to look for a CEO. But you mentioned that the 200 million seed money that the government promised, they have been able to raise that 2 million.
That's right.
But why is it that they have only released 100 million?
The fact is that that money is a seed capital.
Yes.
And it's a seed capital that is released for activities of Sada. Now we have funding for our core activities. So the seed capital will not be used immediately. So if government decides to use part of it for 6 months in order to come and top it up after 6 months, I don't have a quarrel with that.
A quarrel with that. So right now, as of today, how much money has the Ghana government released to Sada in total?
In total, for our operational budget, we've received 30 million cedis cash for 2011. The 2012 budget has been allocated. We've just applied for releases on the 2012 budget allocation. And you and I know that that one takes time. And then the 100 million cedis that has been put aside as seed capital.
Yes.
And we are using it as an investment fund. It's not for operational purposes.
Yes.
So as of now, we've gotten some technical people who are advising us on that kind of investment activities that we'll be using that money for.
Yes.
And once we agree on that, then we'll use that money as investment capital.
But 2012 is halfway gone. Today is 11th June.
That's right.
And you are yet to receive the money for 2012. So when do you expect to receive that money?
I'm saying that the first allocation was for the first half of the year.
Yeah, okay.
And the second half of the year starts in July. So it is in July that we'll start, looking for the money. That's right.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Kabo, let me come to you. Recently, Dr. Baumia made a statement that Sada is just false promises. But now you have Mr. Edie here telling us what is going on the ground. Can you attest to that?
Well, I find it difficult to come to the reality of Sada. In fact, the way it was captioned by the NDC in their manifesto, and the kind of hope which with many Northerners looked up to that particular program. And as the name goes, it talks about Savannah accelerated development. It means that there's going to be some acceleration with
that's semantics.
That's semantics, clearly. But of course, if you're talking to and dealing with the destinies of people, then of course it means that government is very serious about the issue. I am particularly worried, and I believe my my father will agree with me that, to a large extent, it was important that government took the issue of bridging the gap between the North and the South very seriously. And especially, it has been a matter that this country has overlooked for many years. And I said earlier in a previous program that I personally have been very disappointed in the politicians of Northern Ghana, especially having, for us, many years after independence, having sat back to allow this yawning gap. And we cannot totally place the blame right in the forefront of that, but I believe that their generation should have been making major strides in dealing with that. You will agree that before the 2008 election, there was a certain cross-consensus across the political divide that yes, this is a problem, this yawning gap needs to be dealt with in as far as establishing some stability for the country was concerned. And so they captioned it as an accelerated development program. And that meant that from day one, they were going to hit the ground running. I'm particularly surprised that we are being told now, at least from the expose, that so far we had just 130 million in the accounts of Sada. If we're going by what the CEO is talking about, means that they're talking about an office location. The time in which the act was passed was even delayed, and one would have expected that a government that was so serious about this canker, which could probably in the future destabilize the country, should have been taken with some seriousness. But I've been through the northern region. He's been the former regional minister of the north, as far as northern region is concerned. And so I will not in any way impugn his integrity. He knows the veracity of the problem that we have in the northern region. He knows the difficulties that our people are having to go through in terms of uplifting themselves from the shackles of poverty since colonial times and post-independence, and has been a major problem for people to deal with. And so I would have expected a certain level of seriousness, especially when the NDC as a whole, you know, its electoral fortunes hinges to a large extent of about 80% of the total vote cast in the 3 northern regions goes to the NDC. So the acceleration with which they should have dealt with the concerns of the people, I haven't seen that. There has been some alacrity, there has been some nostalgic and inertia in the kick-starting it. It took a very long time for him to be appointed. And some of us hailed his appointment because we know his contribution to northern development as a regional minister and as a senior lecturer at the University for Development Studies. He could come to terms with the difficulties. But I believe, I mean, dealing with politicians is always a difficult problem. And he's admitted that.
You're one of them.
Of course, but he's admitted. But this, I'm a politician, he's a politician too. But he's admitted that at least there has been some delays in the program, and the fact that it should have kick-started in a much more rigorous way for the people to see some real development.
Yeah, you said
I have been very worried with the number of seminars and workshops and programs that have been organized. He will agree that we've had major interventions in the north in as far as bringing our people is concerned. Norip was a classical example. One program that you had worked very closely with as an agriculturist, knowing very well that you had done so much work over the years and knowing the problem. It's not as if that they are coming to now diagnose the issue. They know where the problem is. They know where the targeted investment must go. They know the issue that the whole North and its program must be hinged on agriculture, and therefore government must show a lot more in terms of dealing with that. As I speak now, coming from the North, I just got back from Bolga a short while ago. I mean, going around the 3 northern regions many times in the last 3 years, I cannot see any semblance of any tangibles that one can point to say that, yes, indeed, Sada is a reality for the people. And I'm sure that many of your listeners and viewers, I mean, who are watching clearly, will tell us that they cannot see anything concrete that they can point their hands to. And I'm very sad that this major promise of a seed money of 200 million should have been dealt with. It's not a matter for this government, because this government in the last 3 years has churned out $420 million budgeted, okay, in judgment debts. And if any government is serious about development or bridging the gap between the North and the South, I believe that that particular seriousness with which the NDC attached to debt. Yeah, in fact, we're talking about budget. We're talking about the public funds.
I understand that, but I don't want us to get into the judgment debt matter. Let's focus, please. I'm sorry. Let's focus on this one.
Atu, we are talking about how the country's purse is being expanded.
Yeah.
And we are talking about the priorities of government. All the political parties, MPP, NDC, came to a certain consensus in 2008.
Yes.
Even though we were the big proponents of the Northern Development Authority idea, okay, but at least there was a general consensus politically in the political elite that there was a need for us to do something about this yawning gap. And one would have expected that a priority for any government, having made that consensus, having gotten cross-consensual building across the political elite in the country, that it was important for us to, and they captioned it so nicely, accelerated, and therefore they should have added some seriousness to that.
Okay.
I am disappointed with respect to the time in which the act was passed.
Okay,
because
thank you. I'll come back to that. Let me go back to Mr. Idi and we'll come back to that. Thank you for that. Mr. Idi, as we said, the act was passed in 2010. It's almost getting to 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, to be exact, 2 years. What is going on the ground for Sada right now? If I were to go to the north, what is there to show for that this is what Sada is doing? I know you mentioned something about the floods, but floods is no one knows is going to come. But aside from dealing with the floods, what is something that is going on in the north that you can pinpoint that this is what we are doing for Sada?
Before I go there, let me just make a few comments on statements that Tony just made. That I admitted, I'm not too sure I made any such admission that he's alluding to.
Okay, just clarify.
And then, fortunately for me, Tony Cabo is a student of Integrated Development Studies from UDS, and I feel very proud about the products of the UDS. And he knows very well that if you want to act without planning, you are definitely going to fail. Therefore, anything that you want to do, you must do planning. And that's what he learned at school. And that takes time to actually put a strategic plan in place before you start with implementation. You don't just start implementing because this is what you want to do and you start doing it. You must always plan. And he's been taught all kinds of planning and planning methodologies and all those things. And I'm very confident that he knows about it. For instance, when he talks about seminars, there is no way you will implement a strategic program like Sada without stakeholder participation. And how can you hold stakeholder participation if you do not call people to come and sit together? Now, if you use the jargon seminar in order to denigrate it, that is your choice of word. But I think that stakeholder participation is a very absolutely necessary prerequisite for any development process. And I know that Kabo will definitely agree with me because I know he's been a very good student at UDS and he knows about all this background.
You are proud of your student, that's good.
Yeah, I'm proud that he's one of the students that we brought up at UDS. And now to talk of accelerated development, when we talk of accelerated development, what exactly are we talking of? And I would have wanted this discussion to reduce itself to looking at Sada, what Sada seeks to do, what Sada is doing, and leave our government. I'm not a spokesperson for government. Yes, I have not come to this room to speak for government. I have come to speak on Sada.
That's not the purpose of the program.
Exactly.
We are just focusing there because you are getting money from the government.
That's right.
It's a government-sponsored program, so the government will come in, but we are not here to speak on behalf of the government.
Let me tell you why I'm making this statement. Yeah. You see, I want to be able to, I envisage a Sada that transcends partisanship.
Yes.
I envisage a Sada that transcends different government areas. I mean, as a democratic country, we've asked for constitutional governance.
You know, so, Mr. Eddie, sorry to cut you off. You said something that I think I need to bring your attention to it. Yeah. You said you want a Sada that transcends government.
That no, this is a government, it's a partisanship.
Partisanship, okay. That's right. Thank you for the correction. That is great. Yeah. But let me bring your attention to 2008, just before the elections, there was an act in Parliament that was passed for the Northern Region Development Fund. Is there a reason why the new administration did not follow that, but instead set it aside and go into Sada? Because at least some monies were spent going through the preparation and the legislation and everything. Is there a reason for that? Do you know?
Yes. Let me take you a little back.
Yes, okay.
The whole concept of the disparity in development between the North and South, started from the colonial administration as a result of this using the North as a place. That's right. And then before Nkrumah left, conscious effort was made to bridge the gap between the North and the South. But as a result of the political turmoil after the fall of Kwame Nkrumah, there was a loss of policy direction. And that is what has culminated into this problem that we have. And it has been with governments until in 2005, when we had the APRM, and African Peer Review Mechanism of our neighboring countries. When the peer review mechanism came up in their report in June 2005, they identified this issue as a canker, and that if nothing was done about it, we could end in a situation like La Côte d'Ivoire. And that was during the administration of the NPP administration. And thank God that President Kufuor decided to do something about it. But at the terminal stage of his government, he came up with what do you call it, Northern Development Fund, to which a statement was made releasing 25 million cedis. And that was the end of it.
Mr. Edie, just before we went on break, I asked you to hold your thought. You were talking about what happened in 2008, just before the elections.
That's right.
The Northern Development Fund that was passed, if you can continue.
Yeah. So as I was saying, so based on the APRM recommendations, the government of NPP decided to start with the Northern Development Fund and mention the 25 million cedis that was allocated for its functions. But that was at the terminal stages of that administration, and I'm not too sure if any monies were found in the vaults. I can't vouch for that.
Of course, yeah.
That's right. So, but at that time, during the campaign, I think Professor Mills came up with his concept of how to be able to bridge the gap between the North and the South. And in his opinion, the problem was not a northern problem, and that it was an ecological problem, and that all areas north of the 8th parallel, that includes the 3 northern regions, and then 10 districts in Brong Ahafo, and 4 from Volta region, had the same constraints. And for that matter, Sada was introduced in order to address that inadequacy, which made it completely different from what NDF had envisaged.
No, but my point is that if, okay, it's for Northern Regional Development, if they wanted to add regions, some districts from Volta region and Brown-Ahafo, they could have added it to that and expand it instead of brushing it aside, because the problem is monies were spent on it. So that money went to waste. And as a nation, I don't think we can afford to
You see, the issue is that it's not just about changing names.
Yes.
Because the act that established NDF had a different strategy of its implementation.
Okay.
It wasn't too very obvious from that act how it would be implemented. So I think that it was in the wisdom of the new administration to come out with a clearly defined strategy.
The most important issues that are affecting farmers. The whole issue about agricultural inputs will continue to be a big issue for any agricultural state, and until government is able to guarantee that farmers will be given. How much is the cost of a tractor? It will be important to ask that today, how much is the cost of, you're talking about close to 40,000 Ghana cedis. It's way too expensive. And people are having now to even go for second-hand tractors, which are costing almost 20,000 Ghana cedis. How many smallholder farmers can acquire that? And so if government does not take a deliberate policy to deal with those kind of agricultural inputs, we will only be throwing in tokens of interventions that may not give us the needed, outcome that we are looking for. And we are talking about long-term interventions.
Okay, you said something that is very interesting that I want Mr. Edie to comment on, that about funding. Because, Mr. Edie, we always hear about developmental partners, donors. Today, we all know what is going on in Europe and America. Why are we still dependent on donors? Can we internally raise funds to support Sada? Because without the money coming from Europe, what are we going to do if we cannot raise internal funds to support Sada?
Yeah, let me make it very emphatically clear that Sada's modus operandi is not dependent on donor funding. But what happens is that...
No, but who are these developmental partners that we always hear about? Who are they?
Well, let me explain our context. Now, we have in the north, if you go to the north, you see a myriad of development partners as well as NGOs all operating, in a very confused way. And when you talk of development partners, I'm talking of institutions like USA, Danida, they are all involved. And they all make their contributions in order to be able to address this problem that we all recognize exists. But the opinion of government is that those activities, much as they are welcome, but they must be directed. So SADC's responsibility is to coordinate the activities of all these development partners and NGOs in a strategic manner in order to be able to lead to accelerated development of the North. That's one of the responsibilities that SADA has. And as a result of which we call meetings, we held meetings of development partners to be able to tell them what our strategy is and how whatever they want to do should fit into it. If a donor is bringing in resources, they can manage the resources all right, but we'll be able to try to avoid duplication, avoid overlaps, and try to make sure that they do not all go to concentrate at one particular place and leave some other places. And that is a responsibility that SADA has. Now, coming to the issue that he rightly mentioned, one of the biggest constraints to agricultural production is the inability of farmers to be able to have enough capital, because modernized agriculture normally will involve the use of technology, and technology will involve improved seed, improved fertilizer, and all that. And SADA is not unmindful of this. Indeed, we have what we call the Input Support Program. About 2 weeks back, if you watch in the newspapers, there was an advertisement asking for service providers to show an expression of interest in the SADA area. We got about 56 of those people who have applied. We screened it down to 16, and we are going to use them. SADA is going to provide inputs such as seed, fertilizer, and agrochemicals, and indeed tractor services. I can tell that in a week or two, you will hear about the launching of the tractor services that SADA has brought into the SADA area. We've acquired 100 tractors, and we'll be bringing more. But as a launch,
you can promise the Ghanaian people that these tractors are not going to go to politicians and the farmers have to rent it from the politicians. You can promise Ghanaians on that.
Yes, I can make that. I can make that vow.
Just hold that. Let's get our viewers involved here because our time is almost up. I'm going to read some text messages. Frank A. Kwame. But the issue is, are the people of the North ready to bridge the gap, or they are waiting for the government to develop the region so that they will use one day to destroy everything? They should stop the inter-ethnic, tribal, and chieftaincy conflicts so that government pay attention to them, because we don't want them to use the Sada money to settle their conflicts. Kwame, I'm sorry, today we have conflicts all over Ghana, so the conflict is not limited to only the North, my brother. Bernard Guma, if you talk about conflicts, don't narrow it only to the North, because at the moment, Hohwe is on fire. Part of the central region is also volatile. I will bet that even where you stay and you house, it's not conflict-free. Sada is not there to resolve conflicts. The institutions of states mandated to curtail conflicts must be proactive in order that the whole of Ghana will be peaceful. Bernard Guma, I will argue Sada to concentrate on developing irrigation in all the areas to reduce migration to other parts of the country, and will lead to increased food production, which is a panacea to poverty in the long run. Also, let's give most of the youth the opportunity to serve, especially in developing the North. Let me read one more. Richard Osewusu, this Sada issue, I think it has made the North to relax and sluggish in terms of developing their own community. I disagree with that. Okay, for the final 2 or 3 minutes that we have, let's address this. Sada aims to achieve a forested North, where agriculture will be mechanized by 2030. Do you think we are right on track to meet that goal?
Yeah, we are on track. We're on track because we have a program that we intend to launch in a couple of days or a couple of days' time, that seeks to provide an opportunity for planting 8 million seedlings by employing 5,000 youth on the ground, for them to start first by protecting water bodies in the northern Savannah ecological zone. And the startup is the 5,000 youth that we are going to engage as workers to be able to start with 8 million seedlings. That is our startup. We have been in contact, like I said, with some other development partners that are also particularly interested in this particular one. I can say without hesitation that DFID, for instance, has been very vigorous in trying to address issues of the environment and how to manage the environment.
Okay. Mr. Kalbo, the same question to you. Do you think we are right on track to meet that forested North, where agriculture will be mechanized by 2030? Do you think we are right on track to meet that goal?
With the current stream of funding, I doubt that. I don't think that this administration is in fact taking the issue of northern development very seriously. If indeed we can have, we can prioritize our development agendas and make proper budgetary allocations for that. The question I'll be asking him is, how much is Sada going to spend on this afforestation program? A very important issue, because it's already out there that huge amounts of money are going to be committed to tree planting at a very high cost. And very soon, this data will come out, and we will begin to engage the Sada board on how this particular afforestation stuff will go.
Yeah, I know that this Sada issue, as you said, Sada will be here for the long run. So I know that we'll come back to this issue again, and I just want to take this opportunity for you, gentlemen. Thank you for coming on. Okay, just a minute to give it the wrap up, because our time is almost.
To assure Ghanaians that Sada has been born. Sada promises to be able to deliver what Sada has set out to achieve. For the issue of funding, I'll take a typical example. There's no time to explain it, but we have the Millennium Village project that Sada has launched. We used only 150,000 dollars to prepare a proposal and got DFID to buy into the proposal, and it released 18 million. And our ambition is, within 5 years, to be able to use 150 million cedis to leverage 1.5 billion. And that is what Sada seeks to do, to address the issue of funding.
Our time is up. So
well, but I'm still coming back to the main issue that if this government is seeking to bridge the gap between the North and the South, let's see a better prioritization and an expending of the public funds. You cannot continue to pay out huge amounts of money in judgment debts when we have development issues that are supposed to be dealt with.
Thank you. I know this debate will be going on. We still have some months to debate this issue. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on PM Express.